This will be a video about the death of Queen Elizabeth I. I'm going to start off by assuming knowledge upon you, the viewer. I'm going to assume that you know about the Queen's iconic chastity, her long reign, and her controversial family. All events prior to the Queen's death are relevant, but not relevant for my video. However, we will point out some key notes from her early childhood, her early adulthood, and her life that would greatly affect her overall health as well. And again, I will assume knowledge upon you and that you know about Queen Elizabeth's stepmother and her stepmother's lover that she had after her father passed away. There was inappropriate treatment there, and as a result, this is a trauma that the Queen had to live with for the rest of her life. The Queen also had pressures of image, self-worth, policy, and war. All of these will have the same obvious effect as well. Consider age, loneliness, stress, and poisonous makeup, and you'll see that the eggs of Columbus were prevalent before her final days. This would be a heavy burden to bear, which makes me wonder if this cut her life short or motivated her to stay alive. I personally feel as though the issue of succession motivated her to live, so this issue could be postponed even longer. Elizabeth was known for her vanity. Appearance is easier to control than a country. So, as you can imagine, when the Queen was hit with a case of smallpox that permanently damaged her face, she was devastated. So much relied on her appearance, physically and socially. This is when she acquired the iconic pale white face and rose red lips. This combo will play a major role in the decay of the Queen. The effects of the lead and mercury makeup would take some time to marinate. The first thing you might have seen decaying on the Queen, however, would be her teeth, of all things. Sugar was a new luxury brought to England from the Americas, and the nobility would eat this stuff by the trayful, and they had no idea of the health issues that it would cause. According to the CDC, cavities can cause problems with eating, speaking, even learning. Long-term decay can cause infections under the gums, and the infection can spread. Now, to help combat the unpleasant miasma that was Queen Elizabeth I's breath, she would put perfume-soaked cloth in her mouth to avoid that issue and not offend people. Fun fact, Queen Elizabeth I's favorite candy was candied violets. Also, towards the end of her life, her teeth were reportedly all black from the lack of oral hygiene. I mentioned cavities first, but the effects of the poisonous makeup was not far behind. Elizabeth began to lose hair, her scars were made worse by the makeup, and to combat this, she would have to cake on more makeup. Now, it is reported and a symptom of poisoning by these elements. She began to suffer in her intelligence and behavior. Some of Elizabeth's most cruel acts happened after she began wearing the infamous makeup. She was especially nasty towards married women, acting very bitter and making cruel comments that would have came from a place of jealousy most likely, but more on that later. Her makeup was called Venetian Ceruse or Rouge, or the Spirits of Saturn. I like that one personally. This lead-heavy poison would, as mentioned, actually achieve the opposite desired effect. Elizabeth did lose some hair when she had smallpox, so she was already wearing a wig when she first began to wear the quote-unquote corrective makeup. This would mean that only Elizabeth would have truly seen the dramatic progression of her hair loss due to wearing this poisonous makeup. In fact, Venetian Rouge was declared a poison 31 years after the Queen's death. The major blow from the lead paint on her face is theorized to be blood poisoning. This infection of the bloodstream could have came from a number of places, but the lead would have aided in the infection spreading. Theorized infections are from her neglected oral hygiene, pneumonia, or her coronation ring that was deeply and disgustingly embedded into her skin from 45 years of never taking it off. Now, an interesting thing that I learned while doing research for this video is a concept called the Mask of Youth. Now, the Mask of Youth is a term coined by Sir Roy Strong in the 1970s. It refers to the image Elizabeth portrayed of herself towards the end of her life. In a sense, this was a very effective form of propaganda. One of the biggest fears for Elizabeth was appearing old and losing the respect of her people. Even if Elizabeth would have known that her makeup was poison, I don't think that she would have stopped wearing it. I feel as though Elizabeth had the mindset of some sort of Machiavellianism towards it, that the ends will justify the means. Her image was deeply important to her, and a lot was riding on her image as well. If people thought that she looked old and out of touch, they would have lost a lot more respect for her. As you all know, the Queen lived and reigned for a very long time. In 1603, the average lifespan was 38 years. So as you can imagine, Elizabeth lost a great deal of people she had known her whole life. She had a very famous motto, quote unquote, always the same. This was something she absolutely lived by. She hated filling court with new, younger people every time a lifelong associate died of old age or some sort of disease. Queen Elizabeth absolutely refused for anyone to retire because she didn't want to put new people in. She absolutely hated change. There are a plethora of reasons as to why the untangible wars would cause her to suffer a long period of depression and melancholy towards the end of her life. A very sad reality to face: change. Time. Elizabeth outlived most of everyone. She had constant battles with her image, age, battling her beauty, battling time itself. These words, these thoughts, these expressions, these ideas, the greatest war she would ever face are these things. I wonder if people knew back then, as we should know now, that you'll never win a war against these kind of things. We ought not to forget that whole Mary Queen of Scots fiasco. Now, respect given where it's due, but that action could have had major consequences. With hindsight, she got away with what she did, but she wouldn't know that, obviously. I mean, if we're just killing queens around here, why not kill Queen Elizabeth too? That would have also been in the back of her mind, in the back of everyone's mind. Other monarchs might have felt the same way too, and might have had some sort of retaliation for what she did. A heavy burden of guilt and paranoia certainly plagued her, and this would plague her all the way up until her final years. And to mention again, the poisonous makeup wouldn't have helped with her mental state either. Her bout of melancholy never got any better. It actually worsened as her final days came closer. Some would even describe the state that she was in to be catatonic at times. She began to have emotional fits about the death of her cousin Mary, borderline manically claiming her innocence and regret for her death. She then began to stand for hours upon hours, refusing to lie down. The servants eventually placed cushions around her just in case she collapsed, which she eventually did do. She was too weak to speak, but when asked about her dreaded succession, she was able to name Mary's son, James, as her heir. She was able to do this by making the gesture of a crown above her head whenever people mentioned his name. Queen Elizabeth did end up dying in 1603 at the age of 69. She was undoubtedly the most iconic monarch in all of English history. No other sovereign has had such trials and tribulations only to come out still loved and relevant over 400 years later. Since Queen Elizabeth II passed recently, I thought it'd be a good idea to go back and visit another queen of the same name and same icon status. I'm thinking of making a video about the funeral and the death of Queen Elizabeth, the disgusting and dramatic things that happened at her funeral and, post-mortem. If you would like to see that video, let me know in the comments or leave a like. This is Captain Franklin, and I appreciate you listening. Take care.